Okay, so we will be closing the doors just so everyone inside can also settle in. And if everyone can just get quiet in 30 seconds. I feel like a teacher with a classroom that's coming back after lunch or summer vacations. Will be your host for the day. And in true Pratham fashion, we're going to start with a little bit of a pop quiz before we formally begin with the events of the day. So on the screen here in just a minute, you will see a link, a QR code if you're able to access it from your screen, otherwise a website link and a passcode. So as you might remember, we've done with clickers the quizzes in the past, but in the last few years, just like the world, we've gone digital. And everyone now has apps for this. So if you can open the link there and type in the code, you will see the quiz, the first quiz for the day. And yes, there are more than one. Can we do by show of hands? Can we see when people have logged in? Okay, we can see people are logging in. Pratham team from there can let me know when we can begin. Okay? So we're going to start with the practice question on your screen, and we'll show the question here as well. Yeah. So this is the practice question, an easy one. The ASA report focuses on which of the following domain? This is just to make sure internet is fine and everyone knows their ABCs. We have over 240 people taking the quiz in the room right now. So, yeah. Okay. 10 seconds to go. Will we see the answers here? Okay. Okay, so I'm guessing people were just trying to have fun. The 5 people who said finance. Otherwise, please meet Dr. Willem outside. Okay, so we'll do the next practice question, not related to ASR this time. Okay, over 300 people are here answering the question. That's great. National sport of India. This is a control question. For those who don't remember, this was there in 2018 as well. And we're going to go back and check. So it's a group question at the back, group exercise. Everyone is discussing and answering. Okay, 10 seconds to go. 370 plus members right now. Great. So let's see the responses. Oh my God. So it's a common misconception that hockey is the national sport. Based on an RTI query in 2012, it was actually clarified that India does not have a national sport. So other than the 14 people, some of you have already learned something in the first 10 minutes in the room. Okay, so now we'll get on with the formal part of the quiz. Let's start with the next question. The question is, what does the abbreviation ASSER stand for? And I'm very sorry that there is an answer right behind me. And in front of me as well. Now, Yamini has said it, this is a reading test now. Reading and critical thinking question here. To the Pratham team, in case we get responses quickly, we can move on to the answers. Okay, let's see. Now, these are all the students who are coming back from the summer break of 3 years that we've not met here and are just having fun. Okay, next question. This is a little tough and also tricky. So please keep in mind the exact wording of the question. How many full-scale ASSER surveys have happened before the 2022 ASSER? I have very naughty children sitting in the first and second benches. We can see that this one's a thinker because so far only 100 people have answered. Usually it's like 250 by now. So. Oh, wow. Okay. So let's clarify this because we can see where the 14 is coming from. The operative word was full-scale ASSER surveys. So we've had 12 full-scale ASSERs. Since 2005 until 2014, there were 10 ASSERs. And since then, 2016 and 2018. Outside of this, in 2019 and 2017, we had the alternate year ASSER, which was on different agenda, and it was not full scale. So we had early years and beyond basics. Hence, 12 and not 14, which was the most popular answer. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Can you identify the script that is on the screen and on your phones? No clues here. So we'll quickly jump on to the answers, Karthik. As we move forward, we're going to reduce the time, so everyone has to answer fast. Again, okay. So Telugu seemed like the popular choice, but the correct answer is Malayalam, that's correct. It's the Dravidian language spoken in the Indian states of Kerala and Union territories of Lakshadweep and Puducherry. One of the 22 scheduled languages in India, it has 34 million speakers in India. Okay, next question. So we've moved beyond ASSER. As a lot of people have suggested in the past, we've moved beyond ASSER. We're doing some general quiz now. So who's the captain of India's women's national cricket team? I'm also realizing that Google is being used a lot. So please do not take advantage of all the digital access that you have. Karthik, we're going to have to make sure that it's a fastest finger first now. Everyone's Googling. Okay, let's see the answer. Oh, that's great. And in fact, as we were preparing, I got it wrong. So yes, the correct answer is Harmanpreet Kaur. She is the current captain across all formats. In 2009, during the series against South Africa, she also became the first cricketer for India, male or female, to play in 100 international T20 matches. So this was an important test here because like most of the people who got it wrong said we all thought it was Mithali Raj. We were behind. Okay, next question. Coming back closer to the topic. When was the last national education policy framed? This is, of course, prior to the 2021. Rukmini and Dheera are discussing in the front row. Oh, wow. Karthik, let's wrap in 10 seconds. No? Okay, let's see. We gave very clear options. So, large part of the group got it right. It's correct that it was framed in 1986 and then modified in 1992, which means, almost 3 decades or over 3 decades before the new policy has come into the picture. And of course, that being the policy in 2020. Next question is on the number of districts in India according to the census of 2011. Please keep that operative word in mind. I just realized I messed up by telling you the latest census. Okay, let's see. Great. So those who've reached 766, I think they are referring to a figure from August 2022, but it was not the official census figure because 2011 still continues to be the last census, and 640, of course, being the right answer. 593 is the figure from the 2001 census. So now that we know there are 640 districts as per the census, how many districts do you think, and this is a guess question, ASER reached in 2022 during this ASER exercise? And can I request ASER people who actually did the survey to not answer? It will just skew our sampling a little bit. Did I use that right, Vilima? Okay. Looking at the number of people who are taking the quiz, clearly some of our online viewers, because it's not limited to the room, are also taking the quiz. I hope they're also not using Google at home. Let's see the answer. Great. So 267 people got it right. As you will see later in the day, ASER did in fact reach 616 districts. I don't know who answered 766. I think they were just enjoying it. Okay, so we have 616 districts this year. So this part of the day is what we call usually in a classroom practice as a warm-up exercise. As we finish this warm-up exercise, the last question is just for you to reflect on how you're feeling right now as we enter the day. And I just want to see this word cloud form here to just get a read of the room before we start with the formal part of the day. Good, excited? Someone's mentioned their name. Amazed, motivated, awesome. So we can clearly see almost all of the words that we're seeing are happy and excited feelings. So let's just keep that in mind as we move forward. And to formally get us started, I would like to invite Dr. Vilima Wadhwa, Director of Asar Center, onto the stage.
Hi, good. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's so nice to see all of you in person, especially after the Zoom releases that we've been having for the last 2 years. Thank you so much for braving the cold and making the time to be with us here today. And to all our partners, volunteers, Asar associates, Pratham State teams, and good friends from here and abroad, welcome and thank you for being with us through this journey. Many of you could not be here today, but we hope that you're watching the release somewhere. This year is special. The foundational Asar in which we assess 5 to 16-year-olds in basic arithmetic and reading across all rural districts of the country is back after 4 years. Last time we were in the field nationally was in 2018. And a lot has happened in the last few years. We've had almost 2 years of pandemic-induced school closures. We have a new national education policy after almost 40 years, and we now have a national focus on foundational literacy and numeracy skills. As many of you know, we have done Asar every year from 2005 to 14. We did that for 10 years. After a break in 2015, we started a new series in 2016, wherein the large nationally representative Asar across the country was planned for every other year. So after the national 2018 Asar, we were all set for the next one in 2020. But as you know, in March of 2020, India shut down, and as did the rest of the world. And it is only now, 4 years later, that we were able to do a national field-based Asar in 2022. The adverse effects of the pandemic were felt across all sectors. In education, there were fears of large learning losses because of the COVID-induced school closures, and India had one of the longest durations of school closures, with schools being closed for almost 2 years. But there was an additional fear that with schools closed, children, especially older children and girls, may drop out of school. With livelihoods getting affected and budgets being squeezed, the fear was that children may not return to school either to supplement family income or because their parents could no longer afford to send them to school. The almost universal enrollment that we've had since 2010, when the right to education came into effect, would once again become a target rather than a reality that we had achieved. However, there was no data to evaluate the impact that the pandemic was having on educational outcomes. Asar did manage to do 2 nationally representative phone-based surveys in 2020 and 2021, focusing on children's access to learning materials while schools were closed, but there was no nationally representative data available on learning during this period. With schools closed and many young children waiting to get admission, the situation was fairly fluid, and it was difficult to say whether what we were seeing in the enrollment data was a temporary blip or a change in trend. So the ASER 2022 data will be particularly useful to understand the impact of the pandemic. The last national ASER measurement we have is from 2018. In these 4 years since then, we've had the pandemic-induced school closures of about 2 years, and about 6 to 8 months when children have been back in school before the current ASER was conducted in September of last year. This is important to keep in mind because the ASER 2022 learning estimates are a function of both the learning loss experienced during the pandemic as well as the recovery that has happened since schools have reopened. The new national education policy introduced in 2020 has a big focus on the early years and the importance of foundational competencies. To quote the new education policy, the highest priority of the education system will be to achieve universal foundational literacy and numeracy in primary school by 2025. It further states that the rest of this policy will become relevant for our students only if this basic learning requirement is first met. Once schools reopened, states moved quickly to implement the new national education policy, with almost all states making a major push in the area of foundational literacy and numeracy under the Nipun Bharat initiative. Now that the NEP has set clear FLN goals for across the country and for the entire country, the states are putting in different initiatives to achieve these goals. And the ASER 2022 data can be used as a baseline to monitor progress towards these goals. Since we were doing a nationwide ASER after a long break, we have retained the core elements of ASER so that we have trend data on our standard variables. As in previous years, ASER's reading and arithmetic assessment is exactly the same so as to keep it comparable over time. We have brought back our assessment in English, which we last did in 2016, and we have added a section on FLN implementation and training in our school observations. We have had unprecedented participation in ASER this year with 591 partners and over 25,000 volunteers. We would have loved to have everybody here, but unfortunately, this is not possible, and even our ASER associates and Pratham State teams had to go back to prepare for the releases that's happening simultaneously in the states right now. We have a very special release planned for you today, but before I hand over to Manushi, I'd like to give a very special thanks to the entire ASER team and our DTP team, who have all worked so hard to bring this report to you today. Every year, in the rush to get the report ready on time, we often forget to thank all the people who have been involved in this effort, present and in the past. So I want to end by thanking each and every one of you. A very big thank you. And now, let's see a lovely film that has been made while ASER was in the field.
लेखा मिटा के फिर लिखना है, इतना उतना क्या कितना है, सच है या मृग तृष्णा है।
ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਲਚਲ ਮਚ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ मैं अपने दोस्तों ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲੂੰਗਾ, खेलूंगा ਤੇ पढ़ूंगा, खूब मस्ती करूंगा।
बहुत अच्छा लगा। मैं तैयार होके गए मेरे फ्रेंड को लोग घर में, तो उन लोग को बोला तू लोग तैयार अभी तक क्यों नहीं हुए, तो उन लोग को फटाफट तैयार किया, चलो स्कूल चलो, सब स्कूल आ गए।
ನನಗೆ ನಾ ಸ್ಕೂಲಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ನನಗೆ ಭಾಳ ಬೇಜಾರ್ತೈತೆ ಮನೆ ಕುಂತು ಸ್ಕೂಲಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೋದೆ ಆಟ ಆಡೋಕೆ ಸಿಗ್ತೈತಿ, ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ಓದೋದು ಸಿಗ್ತೈತಿ, ಹುಡುಗರ ತಕ್ಕ ಆಟ ಆಡ್ಬೋದು, ಹಾಲು ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ।
पर मेरा स्कूल जाने के बाद मन नहीं रहता था, बहुत दिन में घर में रहा था, इसलिए मुझे घर आने का मन था। पहिल्या दिवशी मी शाळेत गेलो तेव्हा बाईंनी खेळामध्ये आम्हाला शिकवायला सुरुवात केली, म्हणून आम्हाला शाळेमध्ये खूप आनंद आला।
तो पहले उनका ध्यान नहीं लग रहा था, पर न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी के माध्यम से हम जब सीखे कि एक्टिविटी बेस पर ध्यान देना चाहिए, और हमने एक्टिविटी बेस पर ध्यान दिया और उनका मानसिक स्थिति क्या है ये भी हमने सोचने लगे, और उसका अभी धीरे धीरे पढ़ाई पर ध्यान ज़्यादा से हो रहा है, आनंद से सीख रहे हैं अभी।
ಕತೆ ಬುಕ್ಕಿನಿಂದ ನಾವೇನೋ ಒಂದು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಬೋದು, ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನೋ ಇರ್ತೈತಿ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಬೋದು, ಹೋಗೋದ್ ಬದಲು ನಾವೇ ಬುಕ್ಕ ನೋಡಿ ಕಲ್ತ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು। ನಾನು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕಂತ ಭಾಳ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡುತ್ತೀನಿ। ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ನಾನೇ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಬೇಕು, ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಗುಣ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ನಂದು ಗುಣ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ಅಪ್ಪ ಅಮ್ಮಂದು ಗುಣ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ಅಜ್ಜಿ ತಾತದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತು ಹಿರಿಯದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು।
ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳಿಗೆ 8 ವರ್ಷ ವಯಸ್ಸು, ಭಾಳ ಕನಸು ಇದೆ, ವಿಶಾಲಾದ ಮನಸ್ಸು ಇದೆ।
मैं बड़े होकर डॉक्टर बनना चाहता हूँ। हमारे देश में बहुत सारे आजार बढ़ रहे हैं, इसलिए मुझे डॉक्टर बनना है।
आणि म्हणजे असं कोणी मदत मागितली तर लगेच जाऊ शकतो मदतीला,
मदत करू शकतो तो, मदतीला जातो तो।
पापा और दीदी के लिए बड़ा सा घर बनाऊंगा, अपने लिए एक बड़ी सी गाड़ी खरीदूंगा। मोर जने स्कूल जाए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। मैं स्कूल नहीं जाऊंगी तो क्या बनूंगी, क्या सोच के रखा था, स्कूल नहीं पढ़ूंगी तो क्या करूंगी। मैं हम लोग का गांव में पहली डॉक्टर बनूंगी। हमको डॉक्टर बनना है क्योंकि गांव के लिए सेवा करना है, जैसे मेरा मम्मी मेरा पापा का साथ चाहो।
पढ़ाई विच बहुत मन लगता है, मैं बहुत मुश्किल हुंदी है, पर मैं मेहनत करके कर लेना। मेरे जदों फुल मार्क्स आउंदे आ, मैं अपनी मम्मा नूं दिखाउणा, डैडी नूं दिखाउणा, वो बहुत खुश हुंदे आ, मेरे दिल नूं बहुत सुकून मिलदा है। मैनूं वड्डे होके फौजी बनना है, देश दी रक्षा करूँगा ते मम्मी पापा दा नाम रोशन करूँगा।
खुल गया आसमां का रास्ता देखो,
मैं भी देश ਦੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਵਾਂਗ ਇੱਕ ਨਾਰਮਲ ਬੱਚਾ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਵੱਡਾ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਕੁਝ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ।
खो गया था जो सितारा मिल गया,
ನಾನು ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ಹೋದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಾಧ್ಯ।
रोशन हुई।
मैं अभी तो छोटा हूँ और मुझे अभी बहुत सारी पढ़ाई करनी है। मैं जैसा बड़ा होता जाऊंगा तब मैं मेरा डॉक्टर बनने का सपना पूर्ण करूंगा।
को तू आजाद है,
मैं छोटा सा गांव में रहती हूँ, मेरा विश्वास बहुत बड़ा है।
अब है कहाँ धूप है छम से दिखा, तू है नदी ओ बेखबर, बह चल कहीं उड़ चल कहीं, दिल खुश जहां, तेरी तो मंजिल है वही। क्यों इस कदर हैरान तू, मौसम का है मेहमान तू।
Wow. That was something to experience, especially in this room. For someone who's also seen this before, the experience seeing here with all of you is very different. Going back to one point that Wilma said, that we cannot have almost all of our teams at USSR and state who actually worked on this survey here in the room, we wanted to just make sure that we can actually bring them here in the room with you. Like I said, we've all gone very digital. So I will just request my team over there at the back to, can we have the Zoom feed here? So we have states, and I'm going to just call out a few of the states. So can we start with the West Bengal team? Okay. I think we don't have the audio feed from the teams. So at the top right, here's our West Bengal team saying hi to all of us in the room. I think the audio feed isn't here, but I think that's okay. We can move forward to the Assam team. Like Wilma said, the USSR release, after it's done nationally, is actually released at state level and along with state actors and stakeholders and partners. That's the Assam team there. We can see one big hand right in the front. Moving to the Uttar Pradesh team. Here's our Uttar Pradesh team. They're all very excited, but it's sad that we can't hear them right now. Moving on to the Himachal Pradesh team. Okay. And that's our Himachal Pradesh team. Quieter than the Uttar Pradesh team somehow. Okay, so we'll pause here. We have the rest of the states with us as well, who after the release is done here in Delhi, will be releasing it at the state level. We'll be working with local partners, both USSR and Pratham partners, to just make sure that all involved in the release are a part of it. All involved in the survey are a part of it. As the next step for the day, I would like to now invite our board members who've been instrumental in, with us in helping us support, ensure that the survey hits the ground at the right time. And a few of those are representing the entire board in the room with us today and are going to be with us as part of the release. So let me start by inviting the chairperson of our board first, Mr. Ajay Piramal. Along with Mr. Piramal, we have 3 more members of the board. We have Mr. Jalaj Dani, Mr. Banmali Agrawala, and Mr. Ramesh Mangleshwaran. So, could I also request Dr. Madhav Chavan, co-founder Pratham, to join them on the stage? So we have Dr. Banerjee, CEO of Pratham Education Foundation, also a board member, and Wilma here on the stage. Thank you so much, everyone. So I will request the board members for the time being to step down the stage, because we want to make sure that before we hear from anyone after this, we actually take a look at the findings from the survey. So as always, we have the next film teed up for you all, which captures the findings from the survey of 2022.
ASAR returned to the field nationwide in 2022. It reached almost 7 lakh children in over 19,000 villages across 616 districts in India. This is the 17th ASAR report. ASAR 2022 was implemented 4 years after the last nationwide field-based ASAR in 2018. During this period, the COVID-19 pandemic caused schools across the country to close for about 2 years, with major impacts expected on children's enrollment and learning. Also during this period, India's National Education Policy 2020 was released. A key objective of the new policy is ensuring that all children acquire foundational literacy and numeracy skills by the end of grade 3. Let's take a look at the situation on the ground in 2022. As always, ASAR covers 3 major areas: school enrollment and attendance, basic reading, math and English abilities among children in the age group of 5 to 16, and school facilities. Despite school closures during the pandemic, nationally, enrollment for the 6 to 14 age group increased from 97.2% in 2018 to 98.4% in 2022. The proportion of children between ages 6 to 14 not currently enrolled is down to 1.6%, almost half of what was observed in 2018 and the lowest we have seen in the decade since the Right to Education Act came into effect. The decrease in out-of-school numbers is visible even among older girls who are most at risk of dropping out. The proportion of girls in the age group 15 to 16 who are not enrolled in school dropped from 13.5% in 2018 to 7.9% in 2022. ASAR 2022 also shows a sharp increase in government school enrollments between 2018 and 2022, from 65.6% in 2018 to 72.9% in 2022. This increase is visible in almost all states in the country. However, while private school enrollments declined, the proportion of children taking paid private tuition shows a significant increase, standing at 30.5% in 2022. Attendance trends at the All India level remain close to 2018 levels. Average teacher attendance increased slightly, standing at 87.1% in 2022. Average student attendance continues to hover at around 72% nationally, but shows major variation across states. Nationally, the percentage of children in Standard 3 who could read a Standard 2 level text had been improving slowly from 2010 to 2018. However, this figure dropped from 27.2% in 2018 to 20.5% in 2022. States showing a decline of more than 10 percentage points from 2018 levels include Kerala, Himachal Pradesh and Haryana. Large drops are also visible in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. In Standard 5, the trend is broadly similar. The proportion of children in Standard 5 who can read a Standard 2 level text had improved slightly from 2014 to 2018, but fell sharply to 42.8% in 2022. At the state level, the picture is more varied. States with relatively high reading levels such as Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh showed large drops. But reading levels in Standard 5 held steady in states such as Bihar and Jharkhand. This decline in reading ability is visible in both government and private schools. The setback in children's ability to do basic arithmetic is less alarming. As in the case of reading, small improvements in Standard 3 arithmetic levels were visible at the national level between 2014 and 2018. But in 2022, this figure dropped slightly to 25.9%. However, there is enormous variation across states. For example, while arithmetic levels in Standard 3 stayed the same or improved slightly in states such as Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, they dropped sharply in Tamil Nadu and Haryana. In Standard 8, there is a small increase in the proportion of children who can do division. Interestingly, this figure reflects slightly improved outcomes among girls and slightly worse ones among boys in Standard 8. ASAR last tested children's English ability in 2016. Both then and now, about a quarter of all children in Standard 5 could read simple English sentences. Among children who could read sentences, 62.3% could tell the meaning of the sentences they had read. In 2022, ASAR surveyors visited 17,002 government schools with primary sections. The proportion of government schools with less than 60 students enrolled has increased every year over the last decade and stands at 29.9% in 2022. However, states such as Uttar Pradesh and Kerala show a decrease in the fraction of schools with fewer than 60 students enrolled. This may be due to the large influx of students who were earlier in private schools. The proportion of multi-grade Standard 2 and Standard 4 classrooms also shows a steady increase over the past decade. Nationally, small improvements are visible in all right to education related indicators over 2018 levels, such as electricity, drinking water, availability of usable toilets, and the midday meal. In line with NEP 2020 goals, about 80% of all primary schools visited reported having received a directive to implement foundation literacy and numeracy or FLN activities with their students. And about the same proportion had at least one teacher who had received training on FLN. NEP states that the very highest priority of the education system will be to achieve universal foundational literacy and numeracy in primary school and beyond by 2025. ASAR 2022 highlights both the achievements and the challenges that face us going forward. There is much to feel positive about. Schools are open again and children are back in school in large numbers than before. We are hopeful that ongoing initiatives such as the Nipun Bharat will help children recover from the learning losses sustained during the pandemic, and that the next ASAR will show progress towards the targets set out in the National Education Policy.
What I did not tell everyone before is there's a second quiz, so I hope you all paid attention there. Okay, so now welcoming to stage Mr. Ajay Piramal, who is of course, the chairperson of the Piramal Group, but also chairperson of the board at Pratham Education Foundation for a keynote address today.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to physically meet so many supporters of Pratham and so many of you who have been involved in Pratham, have been involved in ASAR over so many years. And also all those remotely connected through the various states. I just want to welcome you and thank you for all the hard work that you all have been doing. The last few years have been challenging for Pratham, especially the COVID years, but we saw the diligence and the hard work which was put by Pratham team. So I want to just congratulate Rukmini Banerjee, our CEO, and of course Vilima, who's done all this work in ASAR, for their contribution. ASAR started in 2005, and as you've seen now, there have been 12 full surveys done. I remember very clearly the first time when ASAR was started at the board, it was more of a concept. Some of us were worried how it will take place, what will be the reaction. And in the beginning, I can say that some of the findings of ASAR were not always palatable to government, to other institutions, and they were all upset. They doubted the veracity of the data and the conclusions. But I must say that over time, ASAR has now gained enough credibility that it is quoted in the economic surveys, which is given by the government of India. It is quoted in many, many international media, in the press, everywhere else. So it has got its credibility. And the reason for its credibility, of course, is that it is now spread all over the country. As you saw in the data here, 700,000 children were interviewed. It has across 616 districts of the country. And therefore you find that from Kargil in the north to Kanyakumari in the south, and to the remotest districts in Arunachal on the east, to Kutch on the west. So across the country, this is being done. And it is done by Pratham, of course, leading it, but it is a cooperative effort where governments, schools, teachers, parents, lot of civil society, more than 30,000 volunteers are all combining to give us what we look at the status of education. It is, as you have seen, the largest rural education survey that has been carried out. The findings were just shared with us a few minutes ago. So I want to just comment on that. The first is that we've seen that in spite of in the pandemic, the number of children attending government schools has significantly gone up. In the last few years, the increase in government schools admission has been almost 10% more than it was before, which has meant also that a corresponding reduction in private school enrollment. Why is this important? On an average, if you see, when a child goes to a government school, the annual cost of that parent for schooling, including everything, is about 20,000 rupees in a year. In a private school, it is about 47,000 a year. So when a parent is sending one child to school, the saving is almost 27,000. And we found that in most private schools, I'm not talking of the schools in Delhi and Mumbai, but the rural private schools are not really, the standard of teaching is much lower than that of government schools. But yet they have this aura. But that is changing. So can you imagine the saving that is being done to a family? So even if there are 2 kids who are going in a family, you have now a saving of more than 50,000 rupees per year. So this is, I think, a very big change that has taken place, and we must applaud it, because this is a big effort that is being made by government, by NGOs, to see that children go into schools. Another interesting and very important fact is that girls are now, the enrollment of girls in schools and their continuing to remain in schools is much higher than before. And that is because of several programs like the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program, and so on. And this has had also several benefits. First of all, you can see that because girls are getting more educated, the sex ratio at birth has actually moved in favor of girls. And now I think, maybe wrong a little bit numbers, but earlier it was nationwide almost 914 girls to 1,000 boys. That's gone up to 965. So these are in the right direction that we are moving. Another thing, because of girls going into more schools, is the impact that is happening on maternal mortality and infant mortality. And you are seeing that institutional deliveries, which is the most important criteria for maternal and infant mortality, has also gone up significantly. So these are indicators which are not, education has such a wide-reaching impact. And this is what we are seeing today. So I think I'm very excited to see these things. There were certain areas that we need to work upon. And I think the survey also showed. The main, I think there are two big areas that I look upon. One is to see how we can improve the attendance in schools. The attendance levels are still in the 70s. I think they need to go up, and we have to make efforts for that. The second is, we talked about what even the new education policy talks about, what the Nipun Bharat scheme talks about, is how we can increase the learning levels. Of course, one of the big initiatives that's also being done is to create what are other schools in areas. Till now, the focus was that how can you have a school very close to a child's home so that they don't have to go too far and they can actually, school attendance would go up. But now with the increase in infrastructure and all, improvement of infrastructure, government has realized that other schools or a collection of schools together to make a large school makes a difference. And that has made a positive difference. But we have to work towards that to ensure that learning levels go up. You know, we talked about the foundation learning and literacy and math. That is the most important thing. If India has to take its place as a leader in the nation, in the world today, already in this year, I think by June they say, or maybe in the second half of the year, we will be the largest, we will have the largest population in the world, the youngest population in the world. This is where we need to invest in. This is where we need the help of course, NGOs, people like Pratham, the government, the schools, teachers, but corporates. We need the help of more and more civil society, because this should be a big national agenda. How do we improve the school learning levels so that ultimately India gets its rightful position as a leader in this world? And this is with this hope that just as we could increase enrollment in schools to almost now near 100%, as we could improve the enrollment for girls, we will now see that the next surveys of ASAR will show us that learning levels have also gone up. So I want to just once again congratulate the team at Pratham, ASAR, and thank all of you for coming here this morning. Thank you.
Okay. Before we move on to the second part of the day, which as you all know is a panel discussion, we also wanted to show you one more video. This is a video from a long-term supporter, a friend of ASAR who could not be here in person with us today. So a short message from Rohini Nilekani.
Namaste everyone at the ASAR launch. First of all, मैं माफी चाहूंगी कि मैं वहाँ पे आपके साथ नहीं हूँ, मैं नहीं आ पाई। रुक्मिणी जी ने बहुत आग्रह किया था, लेकिन मैं नहीं आ पाई, सो बहुत सॉरी। क्योंकि ये तो मेरा लॉस है, क्योंकि हमेशा हर साल जनवरी में जो ASAR का रिलीज होता है, वो तो एक त्योहार होता है, लर्निंग त्योहार होता है, लर्निंग फेस्टिवल होता है, क्योंकि we can take stock and we can plan every year. Because ASAR, since 2005, I was lucky to be associated with it from the beginning. Since 2005, ASAR is one of the biggest, most important milestones in the learning calendar of the nation. And every year there are some very good high spots, there are some very sad low spots in ASAR, but overall we are seeing a trajectory of more and more commitment to the idea that every single child in India should be on the right track to realize her own potential and to improve her own ability to learn. And इसीलिए असर इतना महत्व रखता है क्योंकि ये तो जन आंदोलन है. यहाँ तो सारे लोगों ने, हजारों लाखों लोगों ने उम्मीद से ये वचन किया है कि हम पहले समझेंगे, जानेंगे कि बच्चे क्या पढ़ रहे हैं और उसके बाद जो उस प्रोसेस में कमियां हो उनको भरने की पूरी दिल से, दिमाग से कोशिश करेंगे. इसलिए असर is such an important thing for me. Such a simple idea in the front end, right? I've been there when surveys are done, the whole village, everybody comes, it becomes a festival to find out, children take the test, everybody wants to take the test. All of you in this room know how joyful that process has become year on year. But such a simple thing on the front end. I know how much hard work and complexity there is at the back end, how much statistical analysis goes into it, both in terms of designing the survey and then understanding and analyzing the result. So really hats off to the whole ASAR team, each and every one of you across the length and breadth of India for what all of you have been doing for so many years. It has shaken up the conscience of the nation towards the learning of our children. It has empowered all citizens to participate in achieving the societal goal of having every child learning well. And this year is very important. The new education policy, the national curriculum framework, there is a huge new emphasis, especially on the foundational years, especially on early learning. And I believe we should seize this opportunity. बहुत उम्मीद से ये हमारी नई कोशिश इस साल से, इसी वक्त अभी से ये होनी चाहिए कि 3 से 5 साल मैक्सिमम में हर एक बच्चे को वो अर्ली लर्निंग एडवांटेज मिल जाए जहाँ पे वो पढ़े, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में, प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में. और गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स की भर्ती भी ज्यादा हो रही है तो हमें तो इस पे तो बहुत ज्यादा ध्यान देना पड़ेगा कि गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स, हम कहते तो हैं गवर्नमेंट स्कूल पर है तो हमारी स्कूल्स, सो उनको कैसे इम्प्रूव करते रहें. और ये साल we have to again promise that within 3 to 5 years, we will ensure that the early learning foundation of every child is rock solid and can rocket her or him off on a lifelong learning journey. I know how hard the ASAR team works. I know this is a big moment for you. Congratulations. And I hope many more philanthropists come in to support this massive national people's exercise, because it is critically important, not just for the future of every little child, but also for the future of this country. Congratulations again and all the best. Dhanyavad and namaste.
The people that we've heard from so far, they kind of summarize all the people who've made ASAR possible. Like Vilma mentioned, the talent that we have within the organization, the support from members of our board, from friends like Rohini, and of course the other key ingredient being the support and partnership with other members of this ecosystem. Stakeholders ranging from government, other non-profits and civil society organizations, corporate, as well as the new EdTech partners. This group of stakeholders actually summarizes what we're going to be able to hear in the panel discussion next. The topic being ASAR through a kaleidoscope of perspectives. So with this in mind, I would like to just invite our panelists for the next session to the stage. We're going to just invite people one by one. So we have Shankar Marovada from EkStep, who's going to be joining us on stage. Shankar is the co-founder and CEO of EkStep, and he's deeply passionate about data, research, and leveraging technology for large-scale societal transformation. Welcome, Shankar. Next, we have on stage Madam Brinda Swarup. Ms. Vrinda Sarup is a retired IAS officer, and among many other posts that she's held, she also served as the Secretary to the Government of India in the Department of School Education. A small surprise here is, can we see Vrinda at the 2005 ASAR release? Just wanted to make sure that whoever's been with us on the journey, we can see their transformation as well. Next on stage, we have Dheer Jingran. Dr. Dheer Jingran is the founder and executive director of the Language and Learning Foundation and has worked in the primary education sector for 31 years. Do we have a picture of Dheer from 2005? Oh, Dheer, have you seen yourself in 2005? Welcome to the stage, Dheer. Next, we have with us Vineet Nair, who is unfortunately currently, oh, he's here. Okay. So I'm so sorry. So next we have with us Mr. Vineet Nair, who is the co-founder and chairman of Sampark Foundation, the organization touching the lives of 10 million children in rural government schools across 8 states currently. He's, of course, the former vice president and CEO of HCL Technologies. Welcome, Vineet. And as the moderator for the session, we have our very own Dr. Madhav Chavan, co-founder of Pratham Education Foundation, member of the board. And do we have a photo of Madhav from the first release? Welcome to the stage, Madhav. Like I said, the agenda for the panel discussion today, the title is ASAR Through a Kaleidoscope of Perspectives, and I'll request Madhav as the moderator to start the panel. We have around, for the panel, we have around 35 minutes, followed by some question and answers towards the end.
Okay.
Great.
So, I didn't know that panel discussions have a title. So somebody, I think Willima suggested or somebody suggested that we should have a name. And since I just watched Kaleidoscope on Netflix, I said, let's make it a Kaleidoscope thing. So, but actually you will see that the 4 panelists here come from completely different backgrounds. We've had associations, and they've been helpful to Pratham, everybody. So we have Shankar, who's been in the technology field, Dheer, who's served in the government, was director of education at one time when we were interacting with the ministry, and then he's in the Learning Foundation. So he's now NGO hat as well, I think. Vrindaji, actually, she was witness to early years of Pratham, not even 2005, when she was Secretary Education in UP. So you've seen a change in UP going on, or not change in UP, and in this data you will see some things changing. So Vrinda has been associated with Pratham longest of all these people. We've had interesting interactions with Vrinda when the first ASAR was released, and oftentimes there was a question mark whether we should have ASAR every year or not. Vineet Nair has a background in corporate technology and so on, but more now because of Sampark Foundation, he is dedicated to the education of Indian children. So this is all that I'm going to say. Now these 4 people, and then Manushi has told us it's 45 minutes. It could be 50, it could be 35. But my first question, so I'm going to stop talking. My first question to the panelists is, you've seen, heard about ASAR 2022, and I want to know, each one takes turns, your reaction to what you just heard and saw. What do you think happened? What do you think should have happened, could have happened, etc., etc. So we can start, whoever can start.
Good morning, everybody. A pleasure to be back physically for the ASAR launch. And let me start by confessing that Madhav is one of my earliest gurus in education. When we started Next Step Foundation in 2015, before that thinking about it in 2014, Madhav was the one who kind of encouraged us to jump into the space. So thank you for that. I think what we heard from Willima and the report is very encouraging. I think all of us were expecting a doomsday scenario because of COVID, and that has not panned out. What I found most encouraging was how the aspirations of parents have translated into them investing in their children's education. Tuitions have gone up, and where they could not afford it, they have switched from private to government. That is very encouraging. They have made whatever efforts they could, and I think that's a very powerful force, a kind of a sacred force for us to be aware of and respect. Interestingly, we all felt that everything is going to change forever, but I think the old adage of the more things change, the more things remain same. I think we are, anybody remembers what Zoom used to be like? Right? At one time we thought we could not do without it. Now we know it's a useful tool, but it is just that, right? The human interaction, I was fascinated by the children saying in the videos, saying that I go to school to play, to have fun with my friends, to learn, right? In everybody's case, learning was the third most, right? And so the drop in learning, much less than what I expected. The interesting thing is, why is the drop in reading more than in arithmetic? And I was having a brief chat with Vilima. One reason is, of course, that it may be that people are sending their children to tuition. Those tuition is more likely to be about science and maths. But I have another hypothesis. As a result of all our dependency on technology, overall reading physically has come down among adults, right? So the possibility that this has translated into less reading among children is something to be investigated, because it has serious consequences. With increasing ubiquitousness of technology, if children reduce their reading, that's not good. The other interesting thing which I saw in this, that was shared a few minutes ago, government children, their parents are sending them to tuition more than private sector, more than the children in private schools after class 4. So I don't know what that means. Up to class 3 or 4, and up to grade 3, up to grade 2, no, 3. 31.4% of government school children go to tuition. It is 32.5% for private. After that, the percentage of government school children going for tuition is much more than in private. I wonder why that is. So the point is, there is something about the aspirations of parents which the household survey is bringing out. They are acting in certain ways, and they are spending in certain ways. I think all government, civil society must take notice of this. The second point is, what we are also seeing, I would say good results. A large part is because of directed efforts of central and state government, triggered by NEP. NEP triggered, Nipun Bharat triggered a sense of mission. And as a country, if nothing else, once a system gets a target, it will chase it, right? And in spite of pandemic, I know that there have been efforts, and that is a very encouraging trend which will only increase in the coming years.
Vineet, would you like to go next? It's up to you.
Yeah, thanks. So good morning. I'd like to make 3 points. The first is that I'm a big fan of Pratham. Very few organizations are capable of putting this report together in this country. The size and scale of the research, the size and scale of the effort, and if I'm right, this is the 12th time this is happening, and the consistency with which they are able to show a spotlight on data is to be applauded. It's not just the finding, but the institution called Pratham, I don't call it an organization, the institution called Pratham should be applauded a big time in this country, that they have consistently put a spotlight, uncomfortable spotlight on data. That data may be correct, you may agree with the data, you may disagree with the data, but you cannot ignore the data. And therefore, that's a human service to anybody who's in the field of education. So a big congratulations to all Pratham people and all the partners who worked in putting this together. Thank you. Yes, a big round of applause. The second is an interesting take on these reports. So I didn't have a report in the morning, so I was looking at last year's report and also looking at some of the data of 2022, which was shared before, and then quickly looking at the 2021 report and looking at 2022 report. A couple of things stood out. If there was no education, school education during COVID time, and the learning outcome showed a certain level of achievement. In 2022 also, there was very limited education time, especially for a class 3 child. He had not seen class 1, he had not seen class 2, and he had a few months of class 3. I presume this work would have happened in October, November, or sometime like that. So the question in my mind is that if I see the difference between the old data and the new data, does school education really make a difference? And does school education make a difference to such an extent that we spend the kind of money we spend in the school education? Because without school education, if, for example, mathematics was about 20%, or 22% now on 22 in a certain state, and it was 25% in 2018. So even if we get to 28, are we talking about spending crores and crores of rupees to get the 3 or 5 or 10% increment on learning outcome? So our school system is broken. This report points out not just the fact that there is a low learning outcome in many states, but the fact is the incremental value which schools are bringing is not very high. And therefore, transforming school education, bringing innovation in school education, and making that the cornerstone of transformation is very, very critical, not just statement of intents, but actually making this happen. And COVID has given us data of how much is base home learning and how much is the difference of school learning. The third point, which is very important and very critical for me, is that this is how a math lesson sounds to a grade 5 child. The implication of this report is not just statistics. The implication of learning outcomes is not math, is not statistics. It is that these children are not able to understand what happens in a school. It sounds like French, and they drop out, and they join the labor pool. So when you read this report, just don't read it as statistics. Read it as an alarming bell, a big alarming bell that many, 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 many children are unable to understand what many others are speaking. Thank you, and thank you, Pratham.
Thank you. The kaleidoscope is working, different perspectives, different ideas coming up. So I would now request Dheer, react to these two or your own points, whichever.
Thanks, Madhav. I think the organizers have really played it safe with about 300 plus years of experience here. And we've been regular visitors to and participants in the ASAR release. I think the report is on expected lines. There is a drop, at least for reading, significant drop. But there are positives that government school enrollments are going up. Attendance is kind of steady. The biggest focus, as for every ASAR report, is the focus on where learning is today. And that this report has come at a time when we have a foundational literacy and numeracy mission, which also focuses on learning. The challenge is in many of the states, everyone thinks learning outcomes can improve. There's a magic wand and you'll just improve learning outcomes without going through what is required to improve the processes and how teaching and learning happens in the school. So that's a big risk. Targets are being fixed in every state, for every district, for what learning outcomes should be achieved by the end of 23, 24, and saying we'll achieve them much before the Nippon target. So that's a big present risk that is there. The other thing that I find in the report, just two more points. One, that the number of small schools with 60 or less enrollment is above 30%, close to 30%. And that's a challenge we face when our organizations, we work in the, in different districts and blocks. 20 kids across 5 grades, 1 teacher or 2 teacher, how do you manage that? So that's something that, that is very, very crucial now, multi-grade, multi-level, that's a big issue. The second thing that I saw in the report was children at age 5, almost 30% or more than 1/4 are in schools, at least in the government. They're in grade 1 or above. So therefore, when we talk about early childhood education and what the new NCF now talks about foundational stage, is actually these kids are, a lot of them are in government schools. And therefore, it's so important to ensure that practices of early childhood education, which are appropriate at that age, actually are practiced in early grades in government schools. Thanks.
Thank you. Vrindaji, it's your turn. You've been Secretary Education and we've had many arguments. But I think you won finally. The infrastructure, the presence of infrastructure so widely across the country has helped in the pandemic. And that's why we see the enrollment going up. Just want to concede that to you.
So thank you, Madhav, and thank you, Pratham, for inviting me. And it's been a long journey since 2005. And I must compliment Pratham and Asar in particular for becoming a benchmark, as it were, for the nation in terms of learning outcomes, tracking change in the school education sector. And kudos to your credibility, to your persistence, and to your value addition in this process. So it's very good to be back and to be able to reflect on that journey. But much more than that, I think it gives us a timeline on analysis. And I would say that this report is even more significant than usual because we are coming out of the pandemic time, where perhaps school education was the worst hit sector due to this pandemic. And for young children to be absolutely disconnected or partially connected with learning processes was a huge setback. But it has had some unintended positive consequences also. I'll come to that, but I think on reflection, one must bear in mind that 22 has a background, and a background of denial. So in that context, if you see some of the 3 things which hit me of the data which is coming out, one, of course, is that government school enrollments have gone up. And this was intuitive, even for those of us who remain connected with the world of education, that there was a shift from fee-paying schools during a period when there was no direct interaction of classroom learning. Parents shifted their children to government schools. So I think a large part of what we were sort of seeing on the field is getting reflected in this report. And this is a choice which may be temporary. One should be alert to that. The second, I think, significant point which I see here is that girls who are slightly older, their enrollment rates and let's say their sustenance in the schooling system is clearly showing signs of improvement. So that's a very big positive because even after a primary school cycle, the girls are the most vulnerable, and then at the secondary stage, they are even more vulnerable. So to see figures of 14 to 16-year-olds fairly steady with slight improvements is extremely heartening. And I think that goes to the point that was made earlier, that perhaps the stake of parents in education is certainly of a much more heightened level than perhaps what we were struggling with a decade or 2 decades ago. And this is one of the unintended positives I'm finding after COVID. The parental respect for schooling and for the children themselves to be able to come out of the confines of homes and be in a different world in school has been a major propulsion. And I think your figures are also showing that once the COVID passed, there was a surge back into schooling. So I think your figures are basically substantiating what perhaps many of your workers would be seeing on the ground also. The third point which I wanted to make was about the learning outcomes. And yes, all of us expected that there would be a dropping off. It's not as sharply reflected here, but for me, I think even a 2 percentage point drop is shattering, because it takes very hard to make the mass average move up. So, but this was expected, and with the kind of reaction we are seeing in the field about coming back to the relevance of schooling, I think this is something which perhaps would get addressed in due time. But significantly, what the data is showing is that there is less of a fall in class 5 on learning levels, much more acute in class 3. And perhaps there is some analysis which needs to go in there, that maybe there's something right which has begun to happen in Nipun Bharat or the foundational learning efforts, where the basic grounding is improving. So I think if class 5 is holding steadier, it's a good sign, and one needs to build upon that. But I'll conclude by saying that, for all our resolve about quality focus, training of teachers, Nipun Bharat, foundational learning, I think there's one significant agreement. I'm not so despondent as Mr. Nair is, but there is something to sit up and see that we still have a missing piece in the puzzle. And invariably, it is leading to what is school management, or what we call accountability to not just targets, but to the change in the classroom process, which actually encourages learning. So I think that piece of the puzzle, hopefully we should be able to address, but that's probably the most challenging part. Thank you.
Thank you. Before moving on to the next one, I want to make a couple of points. One point is that during the pandemic, one of the things that happened, well, first of all, the acceptance of technology by the school system and the administration was just surged. All the resistance just broke down. There was no resistance. Everybody wanted to do it. And the second thing that happened was, earlier I used to keep talking about how the schools and the parents are kind of alienated, separate from each other. The home and school were different. But during the pandemic, the recognition, the piece of the puzzle also is this, that the parents realized what the school was, but the schools also realized that the parents have an important role to play. And this, whether we are going to take it forward, has to be seen. That's the first part. And related to this, somewhere in the data, which is not in the cutouts that we've given you, there is a graph that shows, and this is intuitive as you said, that the percentage of mothers and fathers who had never been to school or been to school less than 5 years has been dropping consistently. So we have an educated parent group now. And the school system now and the NGOs, I suppose, also have to realize that that is a very important resource in the child's education. Because education, after all, is upbringing. It's not just learning of the subjects. Outside, I was surprised to see that children were saying, I learned to make a seesaw. There's posters outside, which, so we have to redefine learning as well. One aspect of learning is what we measure. mathematics, reading, and so on and so forth. The other aspect of learning is something that we don't measure. What have the children learned during this pandemic? They must have learned something more than the school subjects. Anyway, so now the second round, and the question, I don't know how much time we have, 30 minutes? We can go on? Thank you. So, so now that we've come this far, the question is, over the next 3 to 5 years, let's make it 5 years, what, from your own perspective, what would you want or expect to happen, 2 or 3 major changes, 1 or 2 major changes that you expect or want in the education system, schools, whatever you call it, right? So let's start with Dheer. Are you willing to open? This is like the Indian cricket team. The openers were never the same.
Right. So I'll begin by what I think I want to happen and then come to what is expected probably. One thing that we always say now that it's addressed already is our basic learning conditions in school or the learning environment. That is, however, not true. The more we work in schools, we realize that there are single teacher schools. You work in Bastar district, I've just come back, 30% schools are single teacher schools. But elsewhere, it's about 10 to 12, 15%. 2 teachers, of course, the norm almost everywhere for the primary stage. Instructional time is actually quite low in terms of the number of teaching days and within a day, the time that's used for teaching. Could be because of non-teaching tasks. It could be for other reasons. Often attendance of teachers is not the best indicator of how much time is actually devoted to teaching. And the third, I think, which we haven't yet done it well, which is a good standard set of teaching and learning materials and books for the children. This is available in schools, but it's not a clear, very useful set which can be linked to how teaching is to happen. Now, if today basic learning conditions are not available, let's say in 50% of our schools, then it's a big problem. We go with all kinds of pedagogical solutions and feel hollow about it. That when there's very little instructional time, where there's one teacher, how will that be done? So that's my, I want that, we should again look at basic learning conditions in school. It has not, that battle has not been won. So that's the first point. And the second, which I would hope to happen in the coming years, is that early childhood education, whether it's in the Anganwadis or inside a primary school, Balvatika or whatever name you might give, really becomes universal and of high quality. Because that's the foundation that is very, very crucial. And everything that happens, we're talking about FLN in grades 1 to 3, but if we are not able to do that with kids who are 3 to 5, 3 to 6, or at least 4 to 6, 5 to 6, a lot of the work that we try to do in grades 1 to 3 will not bring desired results. That's my wish list.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Shankar?
I volunteer.
Okay. One down.
One down. So, Madhav, building off your point about how do we define education, what I see in the next 5, and I'm stretching it to 7, 8 years, is by 2030, we would have solved the problem of foundational learning as a country.
We would have.
We would have,
Okay.
right? When I say solved, at least not so much that it's a biggest problem the country is tackling. Not 100%, but it's not the main thing that we are worried about. Why do I say that? My experience, it takes around 10 to 15 years for a country to acknowledge a problem. You published Asar in 2005. As a country, we went through the 4 stages of grief. Denial, anger, sadness, grief, and acceptance, right? So by around 2013, 14, when we first started speaking, by then we had accepted, right? And it takes another 10, 15 years to do the other side of it, which is, okay, we should do something. Let's do something. What we have done did not work, right? And momentum gathers until you find a solution and you solve the problem. So if you say from 2015, another 15 years, and some of this has already happened. It might be too strong a point, but I would wager without ASER data, the focus of foundational learning in NEP 2020, 5 years after the acceptance, right? It's not unconnected. Right?
Okay.
The mention of, as Mr. Peramal said, the acceptance is what fed into various policy things. NEP 2020 was a turning point, right? And Dheer and I are part of the National Curriculum Framework. The document for foundational stage at a majestic 360 pages came out on 20th of October. That is a second important document because it redefines the dimensions of learning, not just literacy and numeracy. It talks of 5 dimensions of learning for the first time. So the annual status of education, the definition of education is now more concrete that there are 5 dimensions of learning: physical, so play, etc., socio-emotional, ethical, cognitive, numeracy comes there, language, and most important, cultural and aesthetic development, crafts, music, arts, and these 5 dimensions of learning translate into 12 competencies that the curricular goals are laid out in. So as a country, we must achieve these 12 competencies for children by the time they are in grade 3 end. There is a 13th competency that's added, positive habits of learning. And that's why I was saying, if reading is dropping, so the positive habits of learning, including the ability to focus, to sit on a task, which in this digital era will prove more to be a challenge. 5 dimensions of learning, 13 competencies, and these will be have been detailed out, but can be contextualized into specific learning outcomes. This is an important development. And so therefore, ideally the curriculum framework should have come first and Nipun Bharat, but that's okay. Practicality, it was reversed. So I think this will trigger new types of teaching learning materials, some of which we'll see this year, where we are saying the child should have a diversity of teaching learning materials. A toy is a teaching learning material. White paper on which the child draws is teaching learning material. All that will be laid out with examples. The implementation of that will take 3-4 years. Textbooks will change, assessment patterns will change, a lot of things will change. So if you see the pattern, I'm confident by the time we are in 2030, right, we would not be talking about this problem, we'll be talking of some other problem. And the remnants of this problem that still have to be solved. That's my prediction and logic.
Okay, I want to park a question for you, and maybe the whole panel for the next round, not this round, so that the next person coming in should not worry about this. This is like, spin bowlers coming in, then the new ball will be taken. So the question is, in all this, what do you see the role of technology? It's directed at you, but anybody else can. I'm sure Vineet Nayyar will be happy to take that question. Huh?
For say to 2030, this problem will not be there.
Well, okay, ghee shakkar, chalo. Okay, thank you. Sir.
So, I have strongly believed that hope is not a strategy.
There you go, ghee shakkar ko hata diya.
If you go to ASER launch of 2005, that's the first year.
Yeah.
I'm sure the panel would have said by 2020, learning outcome issues would be closed. I think the NEP and Nipun Bharat are fantastic initiative and at best statement of intent, well thought out statement of intent, and I also had an opportunity with him participating in some of the committee meetings. But having worked with almost 1 lakh schools in rural India, I can tell you it is not enough. The learning, so the answer to the question is what can be different? If you look at the IT services industry, what happened? How is it a $50 billion industry today, which no other industry is? It is because the mavericks in the big name figured one thing out, of the fact that IT software development is a very complex process. Now, if we have a hero called Indian trying to solve that complex problem, we will not have enough of them. And that is exactly what happened in the early decades of Indian IT. So why don't we break this process into multiple processes? Requirement gathering, documentation of the requirement, coding, testing of coding, implementation, then data center implementation. So why don't we break it into 10, 15, and educate and train people only on one vertical skill, not on the 12 vertical skills. Once that idea became standard and there was a certifications, CMM level 5 certifications around it, the Indian IT industry took off, and therefore today everybody in their families have a lot of IT professionals, but they don't understand all 12, they understand one or maybe two of them. And that's the success of Indian IT. Here we are expecting the teacher to do all 12. And we keep on giving them new guidelines, new pedagogy, new processes, new circulars, new training, and we expect her to do all the 12. And unfortunately, in this particular case, she's really, especially teachers in the rural India, are not very well educated and not very well capable of dealing with the complexity. So my vision, I start with hope is not a strategy, but the only way the strategy will work is if we look at the classroom transaction and bring a process in the classroom transaction and figure out how to make the work of the teacher easier, not tougher, and how to give her stuff, not tablets, not computers, but how to give her digestible stuff so that she can transact the class in an innovative fashion, one skill at a time. If we do not do that, then we will keep talking about statement of intent even in 2030. So I'm not necessarily in agreement with the fact that we will not see this happen in 2030 unless somebody comes up with ideas which transforms the classroom transactions, and that would need innovation in process, that would need innovation in pedagogy, that will need innovation in learning, and that would definitely need the innovation in intent, which we already see in form of Nipun Bharat and FLN program.
So now a question targeted at you, but anybody else can take it later on. Given the inadequacies, one teacher, so many children, multi-grade classrooms, and so on, and what we have to achieve, would you say, let's change the model of school? The school is now classrooms and all that. Can we change that? And I pointed out that parents are now more educated. It's possible that a teacher is not the appointed teacher is not the only teacher possible. There could be others also. How do you get a village to contribute to the education of a child? Is it possible to do that? Can we experiment with that? With Sampark Foundation, would you like to experiment with that? I'm sure Pratham would like to participate in something like that as well. So that's the second question, targeted to you. Technology there, classroom to you and Dheer both. And now, last batsman in for second round.
I am always the last batsman, yes.
There's a responsibility there.
Yeah. So I think a little differently, for about more than 2 decades, almost 3 actually, we've continued to have a prism of inputs. We needed schools, we needed the teachers there, then you have to train the teachers with this, that, the other, pedagogic changes and so on.
Yeah.
Now, those are essential up to a point. But I think the stage has now come when if you're looking forward, to me personally, 2 shifts are very important. One is what I call a management shift, and the other is, which was music to my ears when I read the NEP, was about assessment and what do you assess, and that in many ways in India defines what the learning measurement will be. So taking the second one, the very fact that we are committing ourselves now to shift the way our school boards assess students is, I think, the sooner we do it, the better. And those who are working on it, I think I wish them Godspeed and to get it into place as fast as they can. Because if you are assessing correctly, which is reasoning, critical thinking, applicative knowledge, you are not only just signaling a shift from rote with which our school system is totally beset and I think stultified, but more than that, you are actually signaling a huge change in the way teaching happens. And in this manner, I feel our teachers are competent and one has confidence that if they realize that this is what it's all about, teaching learning processes will automatically, no matter how much training additionally you may give to help them, but a teacher is smart enough to know how her student is going to be assessed. And she shifts and she adapts and she does a smart job of it. So I think the way we assess our school boards assessments, it will have a huge trickle-down effect. It's not just the high schools which will be impacted. You will find changes in class 6, 7, and 8, which is in many ways a very critical level of schooling. Middle school will change, and so will it impact primary learning. So a lot of what we talk about, experiential learning and so on and so forth, gets totally hit when he is reaching a completely regurgitation mode when he takes his 10th exam or she takes her 12th exam. So I think this is a systemic signal which has come out at last, and I hope and pray that within 5 years this overhaul is complete. I know CBSE has started this shift quite gradually from year to year on. They're fumbling, but still it's in the right direction. But what worries me is that the school boards which carry many, many more students, which are the state boards, are probably yet not so quickly aligned to this new thinking. Once that happens, I think the whole system, it may take us 10 years, but it's worth the struggle and worth the corrective, and it will be having a huge impact right from the primary level right up to high school. So that is one. And to me, the second most vital thing is that having provided wherewithal for over 2 decades, I think, and this is largely for government, the accountability of the school system to whatever you say are learning outcomes, redefined in terms of reasoning, critical thinking, applicability, whatever. But this is something which the management of, I think, bar China, but then that's a closed system, for a system which is open to, which is an open system of school education, to manage it better is a need which is crying out and has been crying out for many years, and we've been tinkering with it. But now I think an overhaul is required where you have to hold the system accountable to the kids, to the parents. I mean, I see some things happening in some states where they're using the mechanism of the school education committees or for establishing that sense of accountability that my child is learning, that my child is progressing in learning at whatever levels. And with more aware parents, this is one pressure system which has been put in place. But it's there, but it's good, but it's not enough. I think government rules, government systems need to change. And that teacher, which has been recruited, which has been paid one of the highest salaries in the world, which is also getting a lot of inputs and support from other government systems, whether it's training, whether it's support by the block cluster supports. All this has to come down to what are the results, what are the outcomes. And if we are not thinking on those lines, which I'm afraid not many states are, this is something which I think needs a federal push and needs accountability. Otherwise, you can keep giving inputs, keep changing definitions of what education all means about. It's going to not make a slightest difference. I'm a little harsh on this, but it is something which is crying to be corrected, and the sooner we do it, the better it is. Thank you.
Excellent. So let's go to the third round. I've parked 2 questions. You can pick up any more. What? What's she saying? Manushi, you're telling us to shut up? No. Okay. So one question on technology, the other question on the school model, systems change, and so on. So I think it's a free for all. Who would like to go first? Dear, you are gradually raising your hand, so it's okay. No worry.
I'll go one down.
One down? Okay. Shankar, opening?
Sure.
One more
I
time?
think Vineet was.
Okay, Vineet.
So I think it's a relevant question, and going back to that issue is that what has not changed in 70 years, why would it change in the next 5 or 10 years? And therefore, we have to look at solutions which are different. And you absolutely hit the nail on the head, that unless parents, unless panchayat, unless the rural community is interested in education, nothing is going to change. Yeah. Despite all kinds of resources and all kinds of pedagogy and all kinds of intention and all kinds of great programs being made available to them. So absolutely right. So we've started working with the Panchayati Raj Ministry. And this dawned on us almost a year ago, but unfortunately too late, that unless we reignite the desire of education to be the central theme in the panchayats, monitoring of the school will not happen. BRC, CRC monitoring, that is absolutely right, is not happening. And we have tried for the last 10 years, and I don't think it's going to happen, because predominantly because there are too many other issues to monitor, and therefore education, learning outcome, measurement is not going to happen. So therefore, if we can reignite the Panchayati Raj, because they have panchayats because they have selfish interest in education, can make the connection of economic growth to education, and can make them the monitoring agency to the school outcome, give the school the resources which are required, but make panchayat the monitoring agency, is what our attempt is to try and see if we can bring about a change using that route.
But it's from one government to another government. Isn't there a perpetuating problem?
So you've touched a different nerve on this PPP, whatever that means, right? The size and scale of our country is so large that the government has to play the central role and everybody else has to play a catalyst role.
Agreed.
And therefore, we have no choice but to go through Education Ministry, Rural Development Ministry, Panchayati Raj Ministry, whatever resources are landing into that village, we have to try and ignite each one of them so that we achieve the outcomes we wish to achieve. Private organizations do not have the resources, the capability, the wherewithal, and the long-term vision to be able to be the central agency which will bring about a change in education in this country. It has to be centrally the government. So while government is waking up, I'm fantastic, this Nipun Bharat and FLN is fantastic initiative. To take it to the ground is how the organizations like Pratham, us, and many others, LLF, can play by not just igniting the classroom transactions through innovation, but also igniting the SMCs, the panchayats, and the rural, so that all energy moves to monitoring of what we are trying to bring as catalyst change in the classroom.
Right time to get onto technology. Is technology going to show some ray of hope in this, or is it?
I see technology as enabling people to do more, better, faster, cheaper. If it does not do that, it is not empowering.
Okay.
In India, we have hit upon a model over the last 10, 12 years of technology. I'm going beyond education, I'll come back, where we first build the digital infrastructure. Now, it is common to us that to develop, we need physical infrastructure like roads and rails and ports and airports, etc. Digital equivalent of that, not too many countries have invested to create digital infrastructure. The results are stunning. From 2009, when as the part of the Aadhaar startup, from 300, 400 million people not having any identity, we are now the world leader in digital identity. From 2016, where for 70 years we had the problem of payments, etc., we are now the world's leader in digital payments, overtaking China, right? Similarly, in other sectors. And the reason why it's not a flash in the pan, it's not a panacea, but the reason why it's not a flash in the pan is we're building the solution bottom up. Government is investing massive amounts to build digital infrastructure so that others can innovate on top. Don't reinvent, innovate on top. Don't rebuild, build on top. The reason we can casually walk into a mobile store and come out with a mobile connection in a matter of minutes is because of the underlying lot of infrastructure. The reason the coconut seller has a QR code and casually accepts digital payment, which is Star Trek to developed countries, is because digital infrastructure has been built. The same has happened in health and education over the last 4 or 5 years. There are technology-related policies, education-related policies, and infrastructure like Diksha, with a lot of states are using. So the point of education as infrastructure is it should allow a whole host of solutions by NGOs. So we didn't build the GPS, we didn't build the internet, but we're all using it, right? So why should every NGO, every state government rebuild the same technology stack? That's digital infrastructure. So a particular state can decide to choose parts of Diksha or create its own. And if you take a technology platform like Diksha, different people are using it for different purposes. In Bihar, teachers are using it to do micro improvement projects. Around 100,000 of them have been registered. And a micro improvement project is, I'm doing a literacy campaign. I'm painting my wall, right? So that is teachers doing what they do and they're being recognized for it. States are using it to increase the quantity of teachers getting trained from the 10-20% physical to a lot more. Not in replacement of physical. Children are using it to access relevant teaching learning material connected to the textbooks. States like Assam, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat are using it for quick assessments and getting the data back digitally, all with existing infrastructure. So the short point is, obviously I'm very hopeful of technology with all its caveats and limitations and dangers, etc. And a lot has been done in the last few years. But more importantly, as a country, we are creating a new, and when I say new, I mean a new to the world narrative of how technology should solve for outcomes with equity. How technology should solve to leverage the digital dividend and solve for the digital divide. How technology should make sure that language is not a barrier in learning, right? How lack of resources, being in a village far away from city is not a barrier to learning. Quality learning materials is available to everybody. It's a journey, right? But when I see a lot of these various strands and see how they will fit together, I think technology can be an important differentiator in India's education journey.
Okay. So since Vrindaji, you don't want to go last, you can go now before Dheer.
Thank you.
That's, if you want to go last, that's fine by me, okay?
I'm okay, either way, but
okay.
Anyway, but you know, I share your enthusiasm on how technology can make a real difference in the world of education. And certainly, I mean, I underwrite everything what he's saying on terms of it becoming a very powerful management tool again to manage a huge system like ours. And I think more and more states are adapting to this. It has also established a presence in the teaching learning processes, and that is thanks to the pandemic. But it has also taught us a caveat, and its power to be able to move a child's learning and understanding about whatever topic is being undertaken. In the Indian context, the physical presence of a teacher, and more so in the junior classes and middle school, is still coming out as paramount. And so this is essentially a blended learning mechanism that, you know, going forward, I see it as a very useful tool. And certainly as you move up the schooling ladder, it becomes a far bigger presence. And high school students are able to negotiate wonderfully, even in government schools with this. But on the infrastructure part, it is, sorry, let me just add one more point. We also found it's a great tool for supplemental learning or remedial learning or reiterative learning. And especially with children with disabilities, children who drop out because of illness and family circumstances, girls in particular, it's a great tool to help catch up and bring back to the level of learning of, let's say, what's happening in the school. So it has huge potential in the, provided we take it with an understanding of our classrooms. But having said that, I think it's also a question of infrastructure is still up in the air. And if we go to our rural schools, even at block headquarters, in a secondary school or in a high school, we do not have that kind of assured infrastructure which all that teacher has got the inputs on how to handle a blended classroom is able to get this facility across. So we have a long way to go on infrastructure, which is click of a mouse and the class gets engaged. So I have a little, something there, but I'm sure it's something which will, with speed get into. But a large part of it is still a blended way forward, given our Indian classrooms. The private sector, on the other hand, private schools are rushing into it headlong, and a lot of this learning is coming from there also. That you cannot probably replace a teacher. Maybe it's our DNA, maybe it'll take us time. Our kids are very proficient, they're doing very well, but they still need that little edge and push. And if we are able to get a better assessment system and a more applicative system, I think technology will take us much faster forward.
Thank you. So, yes, I do agree personally. Blended learning, hybrid learning, we call it, is important. Children's interaction with each other, group learning, peer learning, all those things are really important. And that, if you want all those things, then the classroom structure, the classroom transactions have to change. You got to change a lot of things about classroom management also. But anyway, I must shut up. Dheer.
Okay, just 3 quick comments, and beginning with classroom processes. And as Vinitji said, I think it's important to focus on competencies, and also how do you help a teacher teach, using a material, using whatever appropriate process is there, so that competency is achieved. So therefore, giving a structure to the teaching and learning process is quite important, and that may ease the teacher's burden as well, and make learning very outcome focused. On assessments, yes, I think the summative assessment that's done by boards must change. But assessments are also being used for accountability by state systems today in a manner that is not the best suited, in the sense that there's a lot of centralized data collection that's happening, very unreliable data, getting every child's data every quarter, and then of course nothing much happens with it. We have to understand, is that going to move a classroom teaching and learning forward? Is learning going to improve in each classroom because of that? So I think there's no, while these large-scale assessments are needed for specific purposes, it's important to focus on how school-based assessments happen, and that should also undergo a change, very focused on which children are achieving competencies, which ones not, what can you do with those kids. That's very important. And that's an area where we've sort of neglected over the past few years. And the last point, I think, is we shouldn't neglect that there is a system, and not just the cluster and BRC, CRC, but the administration, the block education officer and the district education officer and others in Samagra Shiksha are very crucial to what happens inside the school system. And what we need to look at is how does that system change to be less hierarchical, to be more supportive of teachers and others, recognize their work, and also in their reviews and when they talk about what's happening, they should take into account classroom processes and learning. So that level of change is also very crucial. We sometimes just focus on teachers, but they get very influenced by what is coming from these administrative positions. Thank you.
Great. You want something? Yes.
Yeah, just a thought occurred to me. I think in all of this, we should not forget the centrality of the teacher and the centrality of the classroom process. If anything, the pandemic has increased everybody's respect for the teacher, right? So be it technology, policy, administrative structures, and all that, all over the years, right, if they are taking agency away from the teacher, if they are reducing the centrality of the teacher, it is not a good long-term strategy. And therefore, whatever we are doing, if it can enhance the capability of the teacher, if it can give more agency to the teacher and the focus on the centrality of that space, right? Whether it's a classroom or playground or whatever, the interactions is what education learning is about. Whether it is happening between parents and children at home, that's also okay. The teachers, whether it's happening in the community, by the children doing a project in the community, that's also okay. But the centrality of the teacher cannot be compromised, right? Of course, we will move from sage on stage and chalk and talk and all that. So I think in all of this, keeping the child at the center and the only one person who's next to the child all the time in education is the teacher, right? And if you keep these two in mind, whatever innovations, whatever solutions, and we'll come up with, right? As Nandan likes to joke, everybody wants to be an interior designer with a better, clever solution. But very few people want to be the plumber, the pipe guys laying the sewer lines because there's no glamour in it, right? But without that, no interior design, no solution will work. So I think the hard job is to get that right. And that, think of it, Asar has been doing things consistently. One of the things we lack as a country is to take up something and do it consistently. Chop and change, this and that. As Vineet ji said, you've barely digested an instruction before the next instruction comes. So I'm hoping that with a bunch of experiments that have been tried out, over the next few years, we can streamline that, and as a country march towards a clearly laid down goal without compromising teacher centrality.
Thank you. So you've taken your last bit of the summary statement. So everybody else, I'd like to ask you, would you like to take a minute to summarize whatever you want to say, or you are done? बहुत बोल दिया. Vineet, on behalf of the entire panel, would you summarize? Would you say something? What? She's saying no?
Not saying no, but she's making movements.
I'm not looking at her. I was told the superpower here has told me go ahead.
I think I'll just, I
So,
like to...
keeping up with the cricket analogy, when innings go long, there's a fine.
I like to just say that the time for words is over, the time for action has begun.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll stop here. Questions?
So we do want to open up the panel for a few questions. I know in terms of time, we're running a little bit behind, so we'll take a few questions at a time. And if people could be brief while asking questions, that'd be helpful. We're going to have a couple of mics, okay, so behind you there are folks with the mics. If we can just make sure that we're across all aisles. And if people could just put their hand up if they're interested in asking a question.
कोई लिख के रखे सवाल? No questions. As Vineet said,
so there's a
time for
question
words
there.
is over.
There's a question there.
There is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah, so I'll start now. So as Sir pointed out that the digital infrastructure in the country is growing, but my question is, if you have seen the recent Oxfam report and how stark the digital divide is in the country, I have a two-part question. One is, if something like the pandemic happens again in future, how ready our schools to bridge that digital divide, because maximum population, rural population in the country does not have access to internet and digital devices to attend schools online. And the second is, how good is the digital infrastructure in schools right now? Because apart from basic learning, students should also get to learn basic computer devices and internet. So if you can address that.
Okay, let me make it short. I hope we never have a pandemic like this. If it happens, we are still not ready. But I want to remove this romantic notion of technology is only what is used by the child in class and replace the teacher and all. That, if it happens, it's great. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm not even sure that should happen. There's a whole lot of other things, teacher getting latest training material on the phone and still doing chalk and talk. So there are various dimensions of technology, right? And blended learning, all that are still way, way subpar to humans teaching and humans learning from each other. So I think it's a distraction. Thinking about personalized adaptive learning and blended learning and replacing teachers, that's a distraction, it's noise. The real signal is how technology empowers the teacher to teach better with or without technology in class, enables the child to learn better, overcome disabilities, overcome language barriers, allows the system to understand what's happening on the ground. So many other things outside of the classroom transaction. That's the digital infrastructure possibility.
Manushi, I think we need to wrap up. One question, token question has been taken.
Okay, so with that statement, I would like to thank the panel for a very interesting conversation and request the CEO of Pratham, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, to come on stage for closing remarks for the day.
पैनल के लोगों ने जो बोलना था ऑलरेडी बोल दिया है, सो इट्स मेड लाइफ वेरी इजी फॉर मी. वी ऑल नो कि असली रीज़न why people come to the ASR release is often not the data, but what happens after 12:45. And so it's not a good idea to get in the way of that. But मैं सबको thanks देना चाहती हूँ. From my phone I've been seeing all over India, बहुत सारे जगह पे लोग देख रहे हैं, आपकी बातें सुन रहे थे. Including UP team is claiming some credit for Vrinda ji, because she was the architect of UP for a long time. But I would like to say that इस बार असर करके हमें ऐसा लगा कि really life has returned. Whether back to normal or not, we don't know. We used to complain, many of us here, that हमें छुट्टी मिलती थी या हम अपने आप को छुट्टी देते थे 31st December को 5 बजे या 6 बजे, and office खुल जाता था 1st को 2 बजे. 3 years we actually had lots of time, but we really missed that crunch. So I think that ये जो discipline है, ये जो इतने सारे लोग पूरे इंडिया में असर में जुड़ते हैं, उसका एक बहुत बड़ा एनर्जी है. एंड आई थिंक हर साल हर बार बच्चों को फिर से समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है. This film that has been made by a very young lady who's, I think, here in the audience, I feel, here she is, our filmmaker. I think she captures what this whole business about being in school and back to school is. They all say कि हम पढ़ रहे हैं, but they also say कि हम बहुत कुछ और भी कर रहे हैं. And I think उसको पकड़ना बहुत ज़रूरी है. Madhav has been after us for a long time, that get away from this reading and math. Vrinda has hinted also for a long time कि critical thinking, reasoning में चलो. But I think we also need to measure कि बच्चों को मज़ा कितना आता है स्कूल में. And I think that one of the things that at least I felt April के बाद से जब स्कूल खुले कि people were so happy to be back, और उसका अंदाज़ा लगाना मुश्किल है. So now, you know, even the data says everybody is back and more. And I think now it is up to all of us, whether we are in the government or outside, जिस तरीके से भी हम हैं, to say that इन बच्चों का सफ़र को सफल करना ये हमारा क्या कहते हैं, हमारा फ़र्ज़ बनता है. एंड आई थिंक एट द निपुण भारत के जो गोल्स हैं वो क्लासरूम में तो ज़रूर होंगे जिस तरीके से इट हैज़ बीन डिस्क्राइब्ड बाय आवर पैनलिस्ट. बट आई थिंक हिंदुस्तान का हर व्यक्ति बच्चों के साथ खेल सकता है, कहानी पढ़ सकता है, कहानी के ऊपर चर्चा कर सकता है. And the fact that maths has not fallen, I think, is because maths is probably in our daily life. And so it is up to all of us, not just हम जो यहाँ बैठे हैं या जो Zoom पे देख रहे हैं, but ये जो 25-30 हज़ार young लोगों ने असर इस साल करी है, हर एक का फ़र्ज़ बनता है कि इसके आगे भी हम लोग चलें. People in this room will move ahead to go outside and have a good lunch, and so will people on Zoom. But I think that we have our work cut out for us. एक गर्मी की छुट्टी आ रही है जिसमें बहुत सारे लोगों के पास टाइम होता है. Children who are in college, who are in university, who are in high school, 10th के exams almost by April हो जाते हैं. So there is a lot to be done, and I think we are at a good time. I agree that hope is not a strategy, but I think हम strategy बना सकते हैं, and वो थोड़ा सा तो दुनिया उम्मीद पे चलती है, उसको हम साथ लेके चले. Big thank you to everyone, people who are here, people who are on the screen. थोड़ा मैंने हिंदी में बोलने की कोशिश करी बिकॉज मुझे रिमाइंडर्स आ रहे थे कि ये जन आंदोलन है, तो जन के भाषा में भी बोली जाए. सो आई हैव ट्राइड टू डू अ लिटिल बिट. थैंक यू वेरी मच, एंड लेट्स होप कि लगातार हम लोग इस तरह का मिलते रहेंगे, एंड दैट असर का असर ज़रूर होगा. बट आई थिंक इफ़ देर इज़ वन गोल इन इंडिया दैट आई थिंक कैन बी मेट, and I really say this from 300 years of experience, I add all my colleagues who were on the stage, अगर बच्चे 3rd तक सीख जाएं पढ़ना, गणित करना and many other things, I think India will be a really different place. So we need to do that. Thank you. Manushi, is lunch ready, or do we have to keep people engaged?
Well, lunch is ready, but I would love for like 5 more minutes of patience, because I want to do a closing out quiz as we leave from here. Oh wow, that was a very audible sigh. But if we could just have the link back up, just 2-3 questions. Let's see how we're doing against the baseline. I'm kidding, just 2-3 questions and a checking out message. Shall we start? For those who can't see, the code is 4643-4062. Okay, so I think we have enough folks logged on. Let's move to the first question. Yep, we have lots of folks logged on. How many children were surveyed in the 3 to 16 bracket? Willem is telling the answers to the folks sitting in the first bench. Okay, we don't have too much time for every answer, but let's see. Nice. So so 130 folks engaging, and almost 100 getting right. Next question. What percentage of Standard 5 children can read at least at a Standard 2 level text in ASER 2022? This is why the video was very important. More participation this time. We've crossed the 150 mark. Okay, let's see. Okay, so again, majority is correct, but scoped for improvement. Next question. across India, what has been the trend around government school enrollment? There are 4 options for you, one of which is that you cannot comment. That option is to be exercised only if you think the report did not give you an answer. Okay, almost 200 participants. Great. So we've continued to perform better. And then the last question that we have for us is, just like we checked in the morning, as we leave the room for lunch, what is the one word that you would choose to describe your feeling right now? Okay, so the people are responding, okay, in person. So hungry is clearly the answer. I will be quiet now. Please make sure that you join us for lunch right outside. Thank you so much. Hungry continues to be the biggest word.